Right now on Morning News Now, grabbing the gold. Team USA continues to make history at the Paris Games. From an artistic thriller in the pool to a comeback on the track that you just have to see to believe, we've got a look at your Olympic highlights. Also this morning, Debby makes landfall again. Right now, millions are facing flood alerts as the system unleashes tornadoes and swamps to the south. We've got the latest track as the storm starts its slog toward the northeast. Also this morning, Battleground blitz. Just 24 hours after their debut, Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz are pounding the pavement trying to shore up the Midwest. But across the aisle, their Republican rivals are ramping up their attacks, their new focus, and the warning from President Biden about what he thinks could happen if Mr. Trump loses the election. And terror threat thwarted. 3 Taylor Swift shows canceled after police in Europe say they uncovered a plan to attack those concerts. What we've learned about the alleged plot, and the 2 men who are now in custody. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We're going to start this hour by heading to Paris, where Team USA is coming off another exhilarating day of competition that ended with more trips to the medal stand. Perhaps the most exciting medal of the day came from 26-year-old Quincy Hall, who mounted an incredible comeback in the men's 400-meter race to win gold for the U.S. He wasn't even in contention for a medal going into the last turn until an unbelievable burst of speed pushed him into first right at the finish line. Then, as if that weren't enough excitement on the track, Kenneth Rooks also won hardware for the U.S. in a race that came down to the final stretch. He earned silver in the 3,000-meter steeplechase, becoming just the 9th American ever to medal in that event. Here's a bit of what he said about that performance.
It was awesome to realize that last 100 meters that, like, hey, I could take the lead, and I could try and I might be able to get a medal here. To be able to be in that position to medal and to execute the race like I did is just incredible, because it's so hard to do at this stage.
That helped Team USA inch closer to the 100 medal milestone in Paris, where they currently lead the overall medal count with 94. We're going to begin, though, with a soaker sequel that is putting millions of Americans under flood alerts this morning. Overnight, Tropical Storm Debby made her second slow-motion landfall, this time in Bulls Bay, South Carolina, less than 20 miles north of Charleston. Since it first came ashore as a hurricane along Florida's Gulf Coast on Monday, the storm has resulted in at least 6 deaths. Now it's taking aim at North and South Carolina, plus Virginia, and we could see the threat of flooding as far north as Vermont. In Bullock County, Georgia, which is about 50 miles northwest of Savannah, you can see here yards were turned into lakes. One local official said that he has never seen anything like this in more than 75 years. The system, which is moving at a crawl, is not only dumping record rain, it's spawning multiple tornadoes, leaving behind a trail of destruction like this in North Carolina. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin's on the ground in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is about 70 miles north of where Debby made her second landfall early this morning. Aaron, good morning. What are conditions like right now? What are you seeing?
Hey, Joe, well, as you can tell, it's extremely windy. At this point, the tropical storm made landfall at around 2 a.m. in the morning, about 70 miles south of where I'm standing, moving inland very slowly. And inland right now, Joe, is the primary concern, the full impact of the volume of water that is associated with what has been categorized as a super soaker falling on rivers and streams. Those effects, we're told by officials, won't be realized for days, potentially weeks. You mentioned overnight as well, there were reports of tornadoes in nearby North Carolina, at least one tornado striking a home there. Overall, the governor of South Carolina said that this state has been lucky. No fatalities reported in this state, although we know that 4 people were killed in Florida and 1 person was killed in Georgia when this storm was hurricane strength. We're waiting for those overnight damage damage assessments, but right now here in Myrtle Beach, folks so far are breathing a sigh of relief. The biggest impact has been really just local flooding along the coast in this coastal town. Joe.
You know, Aaron, this has been a story all week because Debbie is just inching along, moving at about 5 miles an hour. Typically, a storm this size moves between 11 and 12 miles an hour. It also came ashore while it was still dark out. So with all that in mind, what are officials' biggest concerns in the coming hours and days?
Yeah, as I mentioned, their biggest concern at this point, at least here in South Carolina, is what's happening inland. When all of this water hits those rivers and creeks, the potential for flooding still very much a concern. In this coastal community, the impact is economics. You know, tourism is seen as a major lifeline here in South Carolina. It is a billion-dollar industry. I am standing in a coastal town heavily reliant on tourism. I was out in town just yesterday. There were sandbags outside of restaurants. Shops were completely closed. I spoke to one restaurant owner who told me he's taking it in stride. Take a listen.
It's just the height of the summer season, and people are probably just dwelling and tucking down and hunkering down and trying to get ready for the storm like everybody else.
This isn't good for business.
It's not, no, but we can't stop God. You know, it's what it is. We'll deal with it.
And the hope is that once all this passes, they'll be able to open up and it'll be business as usual. Joe.
What is the message from officials to people there right now as we're still in the middle of all this? And what are some of the resources that are available to folks?
You know, right now, officials are really urging folks to stay out of this weather, to stay home. We saw curfews in place in a number of cities in South Carolina as well as Georgia. Those curfews have been lifted, but they're still urging folks to be cautious. And at this point, in terms of the number of resources that they're dedicating to this here in South Carolina, they've declared an emergency. They're harnessing federal, state, and local resources, including military resources, to make sure that if there is that flooding, that they're ready and with those swift water rescues in place to be able to help folks out. But really, at this point, no swift water rescues have been reported in the state of South Carolina because folks are heeding those warnings and staying home.
All right, that is good to hear. Aaron, thank you so much. Please continue to stay safe. Let's get a closer look at Tropical Storm Debbie's track as it creeps up the coast. Meteorologist Angie Lassman is here with that. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Another day talking about Tropical Storm Debbie. We've got that heavy rain settling in across parts of the Carolinas. You saw Aaron talking about it there. We still have winds at 50 miles per hour, moving at just a crawl to the northwest here. Most of the heaviest of the rain is stretched across parts of North Carolina, but some of that impacting folks from South Carolina and up into portions of the mid-Atlantic. This is the general region that we're going to see the most impactful weather through the day today. One thing to note, we've already seen multiple reports of large and destructive tornadoes across parts of North Carolina, and we do have a tornado watch that's going to last through at least the early afternoon hours. I wouldn't be surprised if we see this extended, shifted over the next maybe couple of hours into the afternoon and potentially a little farther inland. Here's what's going on as far as flood watches, 22 million people included, and look how expansive they are. These have grown in numbers as the morning has gone on. We've got South Carolina to basically New York with those flood watches, especially in the mountainous regions. We're going to be looking at the potential for some really damaging flood conditions as we get through the day today. Here's where we're watching for the potential for some of those stronger storms to develop, maybe a little spin up, some rotation for a tornado or two here as the day goes on. And this is going to last into the evening hours tonight. So just a heads up there, if you live in parts of Virginia and North Carolina, those are some of the spots, including Richmond, that you could see some of that kind of, again, that spin up happening here as the day goes on. Now, as the system is on the move, we've been talking about it for days and days now. It's the rain that's the main focus that we're most concerned about. You can see the timing of this for places like Charlotte. It's now through the day. We're talking 10 p.m. We'll start to see things winding down as far as the heaviest rain is concerned. Maybe pick up another 4 inches for folks there. We've got Roanoke lasting from late into from mid-afternoon to late into the overnight period. We'll see another 5 inches for folks there. And Raleigh, you guys have been in and out of the rain for days now. We've got another 5 inches on tap, and that's going to go through the day today almost in entirety. As we get into tomorrow, the system does weaken. That doesn't really change a whole lot when it comes to the rainfall amounts that we've been expecting. Still, I mean, they're single digits, so it'll still be impactful. We could see some heavy rain associated with this across parts of New York and Pennsylvania. You've got Syracuse picking up 3 inches of rain. This doesn't really start for folks there until we get to noontime tomorrow and lasting through that afternoon drive. So heads up there. By the time we get into the later parts of your Friday and into the evening hours, that's when we'll start to see northern New England get in on this. Again, not quite as crazy of rainfall totals as what we've dealt with across parts of the Carolinas, but just a heads up that we will see some rain there tomorrow. Now, this is the spot that we're going to watch for the flash flooding concern, where you see the dark pink and the light pink. Those are the areas of most concern. Again, Roanoke, Raleigh, Wilmington, Charlotte, all of those same kind of players that we've seen over the past couple of days be dealing with the inundation from the rain. You will have once again a chance for that flooding today. Elsewhere, we've got record highs across parts of the South. Triple digits are out there. We've got, if you're looking for a little sunshine for your Friday, plenty of it across the Midwest and the West. We'll see actually nice conditions and below average highs kind of settle into parts of the northern plains as we begin our weekend. That doesn't happen for the South. You guys are still going to see high 90s, maybe triple digits in a couple of spots across Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, out west, keeping it warm. But look at this on Sunday, Joe. The pleasant highs and the sunshine will return for the East Coast. We'll still see some rain for parts of the Southeast, kind of wrapping up some of those scattered showers, but it'll be much more pleasant than it has been in recent days, and we'll finally get Debbie out of our hair.
Something to look forward to here. All right, but first we're going to talk a little more about Debbie. The storm has already caused dozens of flight cancellations, more than 600 delays across the U.S. today. Some experts expect that we're going to see even more travel interruptions as Debbie continues to make its way up the East Coast, and that can have a domino effect across much of the country. Travel expert from Going.com, Katie Nastro, is here with some tips if you get caught in Debbie's chaos. Katie, good to have you with us. So airlines, they can't control the weather, but what are they doing to try and make things as easy as possible along the eastern seaboard over the next few days?
Yeah, look, the good news is despite Mother Nature wreaking havoc on some parts of the country, there are actually fewer outright cancellations versus delays, which are much easier to deal with. And that means that airlines are really doing what's within their control to minimize the impacts of the weather on their network. So flying different flight paths, higher altitudes, even just implementing those delays to see if they can wait out the conditions. So, you know, there are methods in place that airlines are enacting ahead of these next few days.
So for travelers, if you have a long delay or your flight is canceled and you're stuck at the airport, what are the best options?
Yeah, again, you know, most people are likely to encounter a significant delay across parts of the country, which is far, far easier to deal with, you know, namely in those affected areas of the Southeast, the Mid-Atlantic as the storm moves up. And airlines have actually waived any change fees or fare differences associated if you want to make alternate plans. So there are travel waivers in place, which make it far easier on the wallet for those passengers that are affected. So you can make alternate arrangements, you know, during this time period. And it's good news that, you know, so far today, U.S. carriers are operating with 0% cancellations. And a great tip is if you can make alternate plans, try to target morning flights. Morning flights have a higher on-time arrival rate regardless of what's going on. And so you have a higher likelihood of getting out on time in the morning.
When weather is to blame, is it even possible to get some kind of refund or compensation from airlines to cover your unexpected expenses?
Yeah, unfortunately, when it comes to uncontrollable flight disruptions, like the weather, which is the most common cause, it really leaves travelers at their most vulnerable. We don't have regulations that give you compensation on top of those, you know, already, you know, right to a refund if you choose not to fly or a rebooking. So in this scenario, it's really imperative or just beneficial to take out the credit card that you use to pay for your flight with and see what type of flight disruptions or travel insurances are already built into your credit card, which can be really helpful in this scenario.
For folks who just have a flight later today, they're wondering if they're going to be impacted by this. Just what's some of the basic advice you give people to keep tabs of everything, and if they need to make changes, what are some of the easiest ways to do that?
Yeah, the best thing that you can do is obviously monitor your flight. There are different resources out there, but one of the best and easiest is just downloading your airline's app. And that's really going to be a self-service area where not only are you getting flight alerts, but if you want to make those alternate arrangements, a lot of apps, you can make those alternate arrangements without even getting on the phone with anyone. You can do it all in the app. So you're sort of bypassing those lengthy wait times that we're likely to see. And if you do need to speak with someone on the phone, the biggest tip that we always say at Going, give that international phone line a call. Those agents are able to help you just the same, even if they aren't located in the same state or country that you are in.
I forgot that tip a few weeks ago and ended up just waiting and waiting on the phone. So a good reminder there. Katie Nastro, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Politics now. Vice President Harris and her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are set to meet with union members today in Michigan. That state was the scene of their third rally in 2 days as the new Democratic ticket tours key battleground states with less than 3 months to go until Election Day. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the latest.
A battleground blitz. Vice President Kamala Harris and her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, sweeping through Midwestern swing states.
As we work to move our nation forward, Donald Trump intends to take our nation backward.
The ticket riding a wave of Democratic enthusiasm and cash. The campaign saying it's raised $36 million. Walz going after former President Trump while talking about the experience he and his wife had with IVF.
When Vice President Harris and I and everyone here talks about freedom, we mean the freedom to make your own health care decisions.
Harris did not previously know Walz well, but multiple sources tell NBC News she chose him because they clicked during an in-person interview on Sunday, and that it came down to trusting her gut.
We are running a campaign on behalf of all Americans. And when elected, we will govern on behalf of all Americans.
President Biden was asked if there will be a peaceful transfer of power.
If Trump loses, I'm not confident at all. He means what he says. We don't take him seriously.
Democrats highlighting Walz's working-class rural background and 2 decades in the Army National Guard. Former President Trump arguing Walz is too far left to win.
He's a very liberal man, and he's a shocking pick, and I'm thrilled. I could not be more thrilled.
Meanwhile, his running mate, J.D. Vance's plane landing at the same tarmac as Air Force Two, holding events near the Democrats.
And if what Kamala Harris has done at the southern border, and if what Kamala Harris has done to raise the price of groceries and housing, if that doesn't bother you, then I think that you don't have a pulse.
Vance also slamming Walz for these past comments calling for gun control, saying he carried weapons during war.
And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Walz served in the National Guard, but never in combat.
Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? When was this? What was this weapon that you carried into war?
The Harris campaign said Walz carried, fired, and trained others to use weapons of war innumerable times. Governor Walz would never insult or undermine any American service to this country. While back here in Michigan, Harris and Walz trying to shore up union support.
I've had so many people that have come forward and said they're so excited for this energy that she has brought. It's electrifying. I don't know if Joe Biden could have done that for us.
But some Arab American voters are still skeptical. We first met Lori Kamle-Ajlouni in February. Back then, she wouldn't vote for President Biden because of his response to civilian deaths in Gaza. Harris, now leading the ticket, makes her more hopeful, but
I'm still very leery, nervous that it may be more of the same.
At this point, do you plan to vote for Kamala Harris?
Not unless I hear a permanent, unconditional ceasefire.
That was Gabe Gutierrez reporting. Vice President Harris and Governor Walz are set to visit Battleground, Arizona on Friday and Nevada on Saturday. We're learning new information about the alleged ISIS-linked terror plot that forced Taylor Swift to cancel her weekend concerts in the Austrian capital of Vienna. Organizers canceled the shows because of safety concerns and said they would refund everyone's tickets. Authorities said they foiled a suspected terror plot against her shows. Austrian police said they've arrested 3 people in connection with the plot. Officials say the main suspect has made a full confession. Investigators say the men were radicalized online, while chemical substances and explosive devices were found in the home of one of the suspects. We're going to dig more into the story in the next hour as it develops. We have a lot more to get to this morning, including a new crackdown from Costco, how the wholesale giant working to weed out membership moochers. But first, counter-protesters flood British streets in reaction to far-right riots that have erupted across that country. We've got the latest next. We're back now with the latest on tensions over immigration spilling onto the streets in the UK. Overnight, thousands of peaceful counter-protesters took to the streets to combat more than a week of anti-immigration and racist riots there. NBC News reporter Matt Bodner joins us from London with the latest. Matt, good morning. So help us understand how it got to this point and just how widespread these anti-immigration riots were. I mean, some people were even afraid to go out in some areas, right?
That's right, Joe. The tension over here has been really palpable, and people have been very nervous, not just members of the targeted communities, but the public at large. And I think it just goes to show how out of the norm the scale of this situation is for the UK. And it's really the level of organization and the ambitious scope that sets this apart from other incidents in the past. This particular situation began about a week ago in the town of Southport following the stabbing of 3 young girls. Following that, rumors circulated online that a Muslim asylum seeker was the perpetrator, and this sparked a large clash between far-right agitators and local police. But, for the record, authorities later announced that the suspect was born in the Welsh city of Cardiff, and he'd actually lived in the area for years. Things have since then spiraled from there into a nationwide situation with multiple acts of violence perpetrated in multiple cities over multiple nights. Incidents, for example, have taken place in Belfast, London, and Liverpool. Far-right Telegram channels had been calling for demonstrators to gather outside 30 immigration law firms and refugee centers last night, so there was a lot of concern about last night. And really, it just paints a picture of how widespread this situation became very quickly. And it's really the far-right internet communities that appear to have significantly aggravated the situation to this level.
So then we have these counter-protests last night. Tell us what happened there.
Last night was really an impressive display of community solidarity in many cities, but also strong police preparations. So there were 6,000 riot officers deployed across the country to protect those sites that were listed on those Telegram channels, 1,000 of them, for example, in London, 1,000 of the officers, that is. Reports from across the country suggest that the far-right demonstrators, though, in the end, were outnumbered by counter-protesters nearly everywhere they gathered. In Liverpool, for example, hundreds of peaceful counter-protesters actually formed a human wall outside of a local refugee center to protect it. UK law enforcement officials this morning are declaring their efforts to deter further violence as a success and a really good example of what's possible when police and local communities work together. They're also claiming that their tactics of quick arrests followed by swift trials have significantly deterred the far right here. And they've pointed out that many of the 400 already arrested are known criminals with records, and 140 of them have already been sentenced on a variety of charges, and that number is expected to grow after last night.
You know, Matt, we have seen an increase in anti-immigrant protests here in the U.S., especially near migrant centers. Is that similar to the sentiment that's been swelling in the U.K., and what's being done to try and combat that?
It's definitely fair to say that the UK and the U.S. certainly have a lot of cross-cultural pollination, and in recent years, the far right has been no exception. Many of the factors that are, I think, generally considered to contribute to the spread of far-right ideas in the U.S. are also at play here in the UK. Things such as anxiety over migration and the relationship that has with the labor force, general discontent, and so on. These are all at play here as well. And it was certainly, of course, a motivating force behind the Brexit vote. But this is certainly the first time here in the UK that violence perpetrated by the far right has reached this scale, reached this level.
All right, Matt, thank you so much. Turning now to the Middle East, Israel is on alert over a possible retaliation from Iran following the assassination of Hamas's political chief in Iran last week. It comes after Secretary Blinken said ceasefire talks were reaching a final phase. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joins us now from Tel Aviv. So, Ellison, it has been a volatile period in the Middle East with the assassination of that key Hamas leader in Tehran. It always bears asking, any movement on the ceasefire hostage talks?
It's a really good question because right now, Joe, we have had just a constant flutter in the last 24 hours or so of what feels like completely different perspectives about where ceasefire negotiation talks are and where they may be going in the coming days. I know you and your show have reported on this in the last couple of days that U.S. officials like Secretary of State Antony Blinken have said, hey, the U.S. feels like we're in the final phases of these ceasefire negotiations. At one point, you had Secretary of State Antony Blinken talking about being standing on the 10-yard line. President Biden saying this was entering the final phases. But then within hours of some of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's comments yesterday, we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister's office, and they said that they had sent negotiators to Cairo last Saturday, which is true, and we were reporting on that. But what we didn't know at the time was whether or not anyone from within Hamas had showed up there. Israel released a statement yesterday saying, we were there. We have not heard anything from Hamas since then, essentially saying from their perspective, the hostage talks are just sort of stuck and in a stalemate of sorts. At the same time, Hamas officials have been speaking out in recent days since the death of Ismail Haniyeh and the appointment of Yahya Sinwar as their chief political operative now for the entire organization, saying that the negotiations will likely continue underneath Yahya Sinwar. He had been involved with them prior to taking over Haniyeh's role, but they say that the negotiations have essentially been stopped because they believe that both Israel and the United States have been dishonest in some of their mediation efforts. And one of those officials said just the other day, that's where the problems lie, and they haven't been moving forward right now because of that. So you seem to have this contrast of this question of, are there going to be movements in it? And two of the key players, Israel and Hamas, officials from both of those groups are saying, not right now, but the U.S. striking a very different tone on the other side of the ocean.
Listen, I also want to ask you about Israel's far-right finance minister who's sparking global outrage after he said it might be, quote, justified and moral to starve 2 million people in Gaza in order to free the hostages. What's been the reaction to that? Is the Israeli government distancing itself from those comments at all?
Yeah, I mean, Israeli government officials were quick to say, and off the record in other conversations, that that's not something that is their position or something that they agree with. But I think it's a reminder of how fractured this government is right now in terms of where people are ultimately on negotiations and on what the war in Gaza should look like moving forward. Everyone here, there is large support for this war inside of Gaza, but the question of how should it be carried out and how should efforts with getting hostages back be dealt with. And people, a lot of Israeli officials who identify more as moderate or even on the left, they say these comments were abysmal. They absolutely don't help the goal of getting the 115 plus hostages still believed to be inside of Gaza home and home safely. And bigger picture, when we're talking about this war, a thing to always remember is that wars, no matter how bad they are, they do have sets of rules that are supposed to be adhered to. And we have seen since the very beginning of this conflict accusations leveled against the Israeli government and the Israeli military, accusations that they have been carrying out a genocide, claims they adamantly deny. But remarks like this add to that concern, those frustrations, particularly among Palestinians who are dealing with Israeli airstrikes every single day. Joe.
All right. Ellison, Barbara Ellison, thank you so much. Coming up, Georgia's blue turn was one of the big surprises of the 2020 election. Now the state election board has voted to empower local officials to delay or even refuse election certification. Why some fear that could cause major problems down the road. We're going to dig into it next. Welcome back. It's a move that's drawing national attention. Georgia's Republican-controlled state elections board voted this week to give local officials new powers over the certification of election results. Now, the move could potentially delay or derail the certification of those results. In 2020, then candidate Joe Biden flipped Georgia, defeating former President Trump by nearly 12,000 votes. Now, Mr. Trump's infamous phone call to the Georgia Secretary of State looking to find the number of votes needed to win the state then led to this ongoing criminal investigation into alleged election interference. For more on this, we're joined by NBC News senior reporter Jane Tim. Jane, good to have you with us. So the state election board voted 3-2 to define the certification of election results. There was this 9-hour board meeting this week. Walk us through what's going on here. What is it these rules say?
Yeah, so, I mean, certification of election results is typically a ministerial process where essentially they check the numbers. They check the registration tallies, the vote tallies, the precinct tallies, a little bit like balancing your checkbook for those of us who remember how to do that. Now they say they defined in the election code, this board, the certification of election results as to attest after reasonable inquiry that the tabulation and canvassing of the election results are complete and accurate and that the election results are true and accurate accounting of all the votes cast in this election. It all comes down to that reasonable inquiry phrase. What does that mean? There's 159 counties in Georgia that will be thinking about this reasonable inquiry phrase, and they're all going to have different definitions of what that means. The code itself lays out a very specific process, the one I just talked about, checking the numbers. But people and critics of this rule change are very worried that reasonable inquiry will give people who are believing in election conspiracy theories space to investigate, advance, and do that. And this is a 6-day process, certifying an election, 6 to 7 days, depending on when the holidays hit. There isn't a lot of time to do that. And if you miss these deadlines, it mucks up the whole process. And it's going to give a lot of space for these conversations.
Especially if it's as close as it was in 2020.
Absolutely.
Okay, so reasonable inquiry, that sounds like language that might be ripe for a lawsuit. I mean, do we expect to see something like that here?
Almost certainly someone's going to challenge this, not just because the law does not talk about this rule, and people have argued that there's no basis in law for this rule, but because we are so close to an election, and people don't like to change election rules that close to an election.
Explain to us how Georgia normally certifies election results.
Yeah, so really it's about checking the numbers, and then the counties give their results to the state. The state will do things like audits, checking results other ways, randomized risk-limiting audits is what they call them. And then those results go to the federal government for federal races, and the state certifies the results. So that whole process, everything kind of has to work together. I talked to the Secretary of State's office this week, and I said, what happens if people say, oh, we can't do this because we're worried about Dominion voting machines? They said I expect the courts may well get involved in those kinds of processes. We've seen that elsewhere when people have tried not to certify elections. And that's what we think could happen. In other places, state Supreme Courts have gotten involved and said, look, you have to do this. This is your duty. And in Arizona, there are actually 2 county commissioners who are being prosecuted for felonies for delaying the certification of results.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. We have seen this in other counties all across the country over the last few years, and there are ramifications when people don't try to certify results, right?
Absolutely. We see a checks and balances, but what happens when one county really throws a wrench in the process, we don't know. Because one county can change the results of a congressional race, of a Senate race. These counties are very important, and in Georgia, it's all so close. So this is truly uncharted waters for Georgia, and that's what the Secretary of State told me. They said, look, there's going to be consequences, but we don't know which way this episode is going to go.
All right, we know this is going to be a big issue this year. We know you'll stay on top of it. Jane Tim, thank you so much. In Hawaii, Maui residents are commemorating 1 year since a devastating wildfire killed more than 100 people there and destroyed thousands of homes. The 2023 wildfire was the deadliest in a century, decimating the historic town of Lahaina. It left behind an estimated $5.5 billion in damage, with thousands of people left homeless immediately after the fire. The community has worked tirelessly to recover since then, but still has many challenges ahead. We want to bring in Tiare Lawrence for more. She's a community activist and Maui resident whose home was destroyed by the wildfire. She's someone we've checked in with periodically over the past year. Good to have you with us. First of all, just give us an update on how you and your family have been doing over the last year. I know several family members lived with you after the fires broke out.
Yes, everyone's in good spirit. But, mental health has taken a toll on a lot of the victims over this past year. But, a lot of progress has been made, and we're looking at 98% of the residential lots have been cleared and ready for rebuild. So that's a big improvement over the last year.
I want to ask you more, about the community of Lahaina. What has recovery looked like? Are you where you thought you would be? What more do you think does need to be done in the community?
I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, especially around the housing crisis issue. A lot of families have been displaced. Nearly 1,000 people have moved to the continent simply because they can't stay here in Hawaii. On Maui, the cost of living is too high, and there's limited inventory for housing. So, housing is at the forefront of what is needed to support the families.
I know there were a lot of concerns immediately following the fires that real estate developers would swoop in and buy some of the land. You were instrumental in calling on the government to protect people in Lahaina. So were homeowners able to rebuild? What happened when it came to trying to make sure that land remained untouched?
It's still a threat. We have several lots going up for sale. And we're hoping that the work of the Lahaina Community Land Trust can help to protect these lands, we can purchase these lands and keep the lands in public hands for the generational families of Lahaina. So there's that happening too. But that threat is real, you know. Maui is a special place, and investors, speculators, of course, they want a piece of the pie, but we're doing everything we can to make sure that they don't swoop in. And that's through policy and through all kinds of work.
Your family has deep roots in Lahaina. What is it you're working on now, and what is it you want everyone to know about Lahaina?
You know, what I'm working on as a community organizer, I work a lot around policy issues. And so we've been working really hard to pass a short-term rental bill that will phase out short-term rentals, especially out on the west side of Maui, that would open up a lot of housing inventory that is deeply needed. And, you know, some people aren't happy about it, but I can tell you one thing, the residents, the local working families are looking forward to less tourism in our neighborhoods.
We're marking 1 year right now. At what point do you think things will be back to something resembling normal? Is it going to be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Probably around 10 years or more. You know, the first homes are being built as we speak. There's 40 homes, or 28 homes actually currently being built. 48 permits have been issued. And by the end of this year, the first home should be built. But, you know, in terms of like the infrastructure, the wastewater, you know, all the upgrades that need to be done, that's going to take a long time. I'm thinking our town won't be built back for at least another 8 to 10 years. But I see this as an opportunity of restoration to restore some of the cultural, historical sites that were taken away from us. There's a lot of talk about restoring our wetlands that once existed prior to plantation and to tourism. And so I hope that a lot of these things will happen.
In the wake of so much darkness, Tiare Lawrence, I know you have been a light, so we want to thank you for joining us and everything you've done. We're wishing you, your family, your community the best.
And thank you to everyone from around the world that supported our community. We deeply appreciate it. Mahalo.
Mahalo. All right, coming up, we are getting new insight into one of history's oldest mysteries. The new research aiming to get to the bottom of how the pyramids of Egypt were built. That is next. Welcome back. Let's get a look at some financial headlines this morning. Costco members start getting those membership IDs ready at the door. CNBC's Silvana Henao is here to explain that and some other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yeah, so Costco is cracking down on non-members. The warehouse retailer has started installing card scanners at store entrances. Costco says once those are deployed, all members must scan their physical or digital membership card. If your card doesn't have a photo, you'll have to also show an ID. Costco making the move following concerns non-members are showing up with someone else's card to take advantage of discounts. Meanwhile, Apple could charge users up to $20 for its advanced artificial intelligence features. Analysts have told CNBC the company is looking to boost the growth of its services business. Apple plans to roll out Apple Intelligence across some of its devices this fall. Now, it's not unusual for companies to charge for AI features. OpenAI has a subscription fee for its advanced ChatGPT tools, and Microsoft charges for Copilot. And McDonald's wants to make collectibles cool again. It's offering customers a new combo meal with a one-of-a-kind cup to unlock core memories. The meal and 6 collectible cups will be available starting online on Tuesday in stores and at the drive-thru. The cup designs include Hello Kitty and Peanuts characters, Beanie Babies, Barbie and Hot Wheels, and Shrek, Jurassic Park, and the Minions, Joe.
I remember my old glasses.
I know, I remember. It definitely unlocks core memories for me as well, Joe.
Definitely, I can feel the nostalgia. Very cool, Silvana.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Some new research is offering insight into how the Great Pyramids in Egypt may have been built. It's a mystery that has baffled historians for centuries. Now, keep in mind, these are just theories. Here's a hint, though. It probably wasn't aliens, though not everyone is convinced. NBC News correspondent David Noriega has the story.
The age-old question. How did the Egyptians build the pyramids? Perplexing historians all the way back to ancient Greece, stumping Napoleon's archaeologists, and becoming the butt of jokes today.
Did they start at the top and work down, or start at the bottom and work up?
Although we're fairly sure they started at the bottom, we still don't know exactly how they did it. There are all kinds of theories, ramps, cranes, and yes, aliens.
Probably extraterrestrials.
Now we're getting a new potential answer, one a little more grounded in reality. Water. Researchers just published a study suggesting that hydraulic force could have helped build the step pyramid for Pharaoh Djoser more than 4,600 years ago. It's the oldest of the 7 monumental pyramids in Egypt and was at the time the largest structure, coming in at 204 feet. That's King, or Pharaoh, LeBron James, stacked head to toe more than 30 times. Some of those stones weighing more than 600 pounds. The researchers now say the internal architecture of the pyramid supports a new theory, a hydraulic lift. A nearby structure might have functioned as a dam. Water could have flowed into shafts inside the pyramid that would have raised some sort of float carrying the stones, like a water elevator. They say the discovery represents a significant leap in our comprehension of ancient Egyptian engineering. The question is, where would the water have come from? Researchers say the area used to be more of a savanna than a desert, getting a lot more rain than it does now. But some experts are skeptical.
I think it's extremely unlikely, to say the least.
John Darnell is a professor of Egyptology at Yale.
We don't have any evidence for the Egyptians making use of, let's say, water pressure or understanding or exploiting that. It would be very difficult to do that using the structures they're describing, because the enclosure would leach water into the desert.
The researchers behind the new study say there's more to investigate. They're looking into whether other pyramids could have been built in a similar way, from the inside out. So in many ways, it all remains a mystery. And alien watchers can keep their eyes on the skies. David Noriega, NBC News.
Mystery not solved. All right. The Paris Summer Games may be coming to a close, but that means the countdown to the Winter Olympics is on in Italy. Up next, we are going to sit down with 2-time Olympic gold medalist, alpine skiing superstar Michaela Schifrin for a look at what we can expect in 2026. Stay with us. Welcome back. At the Paris Olympics, the track and field team for Team USA delivered a string of unforgettable performances that earned spots on the podium. Virginia native Quincy Hall pulled off an epic comeback in the final stretch of the men's 400-meter race to win one of 3 new gold medals for the U.S. on Wednesday. And that now brings the total to 27 golds for the U.S. in these summer games. NBC's Jay Gray is live in Paris with the latest. Jay, good morning. Good to have you with us. So it was impossible not to be on the edge of your seat for that last sprint. Talk to us about Quincy Hall and who else made it in the track and field events.
Yeah, it was just so amazing to see. We got a bit of breaking news out of Paris, actually, involving the Olympics. We now know who the closing flag bearers will be. The team has voted Katie Ledecky, one of those flag bearers. That's not a big surprise. She's been one of the faces of the games for Team USA. And Nick Mead, an honor for one of the rowers, and they've done a fantastic job here as well. So Nick Mead, Katie Ledecky as the closing ceremony flag bearers. And they do have a lot to celebrate, including last night. Quincy Hall was not really considered in the 400. I mean, to talk about, but he wasn't a favorite for sure, and he was behind coming into the close there. He turns on the gas, finds another gear, surges to the front. It's another photo finish. He wins in 43.40, an amazing go for the Americans and Quincy Hall. Katie Moon in the pole vault. She's already medaled in Tokyo. She comes back here and grabs silver as well, a 2-time Olympic medalist. Katie Moon winning the silver in pole vault. And then you've got Kenneth Rooks. Look, he's sitting back there. He's biding his time. He's an Olympic rookie. All of a sudden, he sees a break, goes for it. He takes the lead briefly and holds on to win the silver in the steeplechase. That's an event, that you don't often hear a lot of Americans medaling in. So a big silver in the steeple chase for Kenneth Rooks.
So, Jay, Team USA also brought home a pair of medals that were a long time coming in their events. That includes the artistic swimming. We used to call it synchronized swimming. The team went viral after moonwalking upside down to Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal. How'd that go down?
Yeah, look, maybe you, Joe, I can't even do that above water on the solid ground. Artistic swimming was unbelievable. They had such great routines here. They really dove into this, pun intended, to try and bring home a medal. They were very strong coming into the events, and they take home the silver. That is fantastic after such a long drought, 20-year drought since we had won a medal in artistic swimming. And then let's talk about Hampton Morris. Weightlifting, this guy comes in, wins the bronze. It's 1984 was the last time an American man won a medal in weightlifting. Look, we got the guns now, Joe. Weightlifting, Team USA with the bronze.
That is awesome. All right, 4 days left of the games. Jay, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, look, and I'm a little worried. You know, we've been trying to show you some of the gear of Team USA. This is the men's volleyball jersey. We are running out of time, Joe. And you know I like to show you stuff, and I've got plenty to show you. Let's start with some of it. Beach volleyball. That's the ball that they wear. Women's soccer, they're still in the hunt for the gold, and we got the women's soccer jersey right there. Even the horsies in equestrian get a little crocheted hat. This is, it's not really a hat. It's the blinders that they wear, but that's for the horses. And this is the boot that the equestrian women wear, the rich Corinthian leather. This is beautiful. Cycling has been a fantastic go here. Look at the cycling helmet. You can see the cycling helmet they wear. We also have the cycling shoe. There's even there's a pedal inside the shoe. I hope they didn't need this, Joe. That's another thing that we've got here. Just so much diving. We won't talk a lot about this, but this is the diving swimsuit. Joe, I've got so much more to show you. Yeah, one more, Joe. Look, there's the breaking shirt. Break dancing is a big deal here. I've got stuff. Look, our friends to the north, Joe. Joe, this is the Team Canada opening. Just a few more, Joe. Just a few more. This is the jacket
I'm going to have
for Team
to cut
Canada.
You off here because I feel like we could do this for a few more hours
Judo.
here.
Look at the judo. Joe, I'm a purple belt. Judo's in the house. We can do whatever we want here, Joe.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it, Jay.
So long, guys. I got so much stuff.
All right, with the summer games now winding down, we thought it might be a good time to talk about the Winter Olympics. The 2026 event will be held in Milano Cortina, making it the 4th time the games will be held in Italy. Joining us now, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, alpine skiing superstar, Michaela Schifrin, with a preview of what we might see in the next 2 years. Michaela, seeing Jay there putting on all that gear, you got to be getting pretty excited.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely exciting. I mean, there's a lot of good swag, and I'm a little jealous of some of the summer gear that everybody gets here, because I'm like, we've got jackets. It's kind of hard to store them. Like, our stuff takes up so much space. No, it's really cool to be here and experience this.
Yeah, let's point that out. You are actually in Paris taking in some of this year's biggest events, including Quincy Hall's thrilling gold medal win yesterday. Besides the obvious, I mean, talk about some of the biggest differences between the winter and summer games that you've noticed, and how can being a spectator help you prepare for 2026?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like you said, besides obvious, there are a lot of differences. It's summer versus winter, first and foremost. But I'm kind of here partially for the similarities. I feel like the Olympics have a different vibe from the normal World Cup races that I ski, that the Alpine, that all of the athletes are a part of. And there's a coloring, there's like a color scheme. There's there's the security checkpoints. There's all of these different things. There's the Olympic rings, which are everywhere. And even that, it's all of this, like, it's kind of a psychological tool, I guess. Less than 2 years out of when I hope to be competing, it's a way for me to get in touch with that Olympic vibe. And then, I start World Cup racing. Our season starts in October. So I'm in the middle of kind of my hardcore prep time, but stopping in Paris and get to experience these athletes competing, it helps me get in the zone a little bit, but it's also just an incredible thing to be a spectator at an event like this.
And try not to be tempted too much by all the great food there. So, I mean, women's skiing specifically is going to take place in Cortina. That's in the very northern part of Italy. Obviously, you've been successful there in the past, winning 4 medals, 4 different events at the 2021 Alpine World Ski Championships. How do you prepare? How has your training regimen changed over all these years?
Yeah, I mean, just getting older each year, my body I feel like I just get more sore more quickly. So I have to be a little bit more precise with how much I train, just the sheer volume, and kind of go for more quality and intensity over quantity. But I am an athlete. My confidence is completely built off of preparation. And I imagine most athletes are that way. But if I don't feel 110% prepared, then I'm really not confident at all.
Yeah.
So much of it is about getting the preparation at this time of the year right now. Like, I'm heading to South America in a couple of days for ski camp, getting ready for this season. And then this season, World Championships this year, and then next season, that'll lead. Normally it leads pretty well into the games, and then I'm feeling good.
All right. I feel you on the old and sore part too there. All right. Michaela Schifrin, good to see you. Wish you all the best. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Have a good one.
That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but stick with us. The news continues right now. Good Thursday morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. Right now on Morning News Now, stop me if you think you've heard this one before, but Team USA is racking up another batch of medals with a viral show-stopping routine from the artistic swimming squad. They're bringing home their own Olympic hardware for the first time in 20 years. Plus a final sprint for the ages with that all-enticing glimmer of gold at the finish line. We've got all the highlights from Paris in just a moment. States of emergency knew overnight a dangerous and deadly tropical storm Debby making landfall again, this time over the Carolinas. The massive storm already bringing heavy flooding, even tornadoes. Our Angie Lastman has the latest track as Debby slowly makes its way up the East Coast. Plus, Taylor Terror, the pop star canceling an upcoming run of her Eras tour in Vienna this weekend after Austrian police say they foiled a potential terror plot that may have been targeting the shows. What we know about the two suspects now in custody and how fans are reacting. And Stardate. When will those two NASA astronauts still aboard the International Space Station finally make it back down to Earth? Well, mission managers now say they could be up there till 2025. But not to worry, they're going to have a little help from their friends at SpaceX to bring them home. We're going to explain later. Good to have you with us. With just several days left of the Summer Olympics, we start with the latest medals for Team USA in Paris. The U.S. added 3 new golds to their tally on Wednesday with the help of track star Quincy Hall in the 400-meter race and Sarah Hildebrandt in wrestling. That also includes first place in the women's team pursuit event, which marks the second cycling gold of the Games for 31-year-old Kristen Faulkner, who continues to defy all the odds against her. You'll remember she's the venture capitalist turned cyclist who was called up to the Olympic team at the last second and didn't even start racing until 7 years ago. So how does that transition into being a world-class athlete work? Well, here's what she had to say after the event.
A lot of what I learned how to do is how to take calculated risks, and how to assess risk. And, if there's a high risk but the reward is high, then it might be worth it. And I think in a race, I take that mindset with me, throughout the race. When I started the race, I wasn't here to participate. I was here to bring home a medal.
And with 27 more medal events on the schedule today, we're going to bring you all the latest from the Olympics in just a few minutes. First this morning, tens of thousands of people are waking up without power. Millions are under flood alerts as Tropical Storm Debby makes its second landfall this week. The system, which is already blamed for 6 deaths, is crawling up the East Coast at just half the speed of a storm this size usually moves. Now, so far, it's dumped record rain on Georgia and South Carolina, which has triggered life-threatening floods as well as multiple tornadoes. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra is tracking the storm's path from Lucama, North Carolina. Marissa, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. We are outside of one of the homes that was damaged from what was likely a tornado overnight. And we say likely because we can't say it was officially a tornado until the National Weather Service comes here and confirms that. But what you see behind me is just one of the homes that was damaged on this street here. You can see the top part of that house had collapsed on itself, and you might be able to see search and rescue teams behind me because they are looking for what they believe was a man inside. They do not know yet. That is not fully confirmed, but we do know that that's what they are searching for. for to make sure that there is no one trapped inside. And that's the reality of this. You know, when we talk about the slow-moving storm system, this storm system is moving at a crawl at just anywhere between 5 to 7 miles per hour. It's easy to look at that and think that it may not be that dangerous. But, Joe, you just talked about those at least 6 deaths confirmed. Between flood risks and tornado warnings today, we are seeing that what Debby lacks in speed, she makes up for in the threat of flooding and tornadoes.
This morning, from a tropical storm to tornado fears, a possible twister touching down near Raleigh, North Carolina, damaging this middle school. It comes after a tornado tore through the central part of the state in Sampson County yesterday.
I was very scared.
As Tropical Storm Debby continues to soak the East Coast. North Carolina's governor warning his state could get hit with more rain in one day than they normally see in months, urging people to stay off the roads.
Now is not the time to see if your car floats, because it doesn't.
20 million people are under flood alerts from Georgia to New York. In Bullock County, Georgia, a number of roads washed out after dams were overpowered by fast-moving floodwaters. Rains from the tropical storm already flooding communities as far north as New York and New Jersey.
And all the water overflowed into our homes over here.
Snarling air travel with serious flight delays up and down the East Coast.
We were just devastated. It was bad.
So you can see search and rescue crews as well as fire department members here frantically searching inside. We've seen them here for the last hour. They've been calling out his name. We're waiting for an update. Obviously, all of us are hoping for the best here, Joe. But important to remember for anyone watching, particularly in the path of Debby, North Carolina and Virginia, this is a dual threat day. Of course, the flood risk we have been talking about, but we also understand that today could be the most severe tornado threat we've seen yet when it comes to Debby. So if you are in those affected areas, definitely not the day to be traveling on the roads if you can avoid it, Joe.
All right, Marissa, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin, who's on the ground in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, nearly 75 miles north of where Debby made her second landfall earlier this morning. So, Aaron, what's the weather looking like there and what's expected today?
Hey, Joe. Well, right now we're experiencing some pretty strong wind. As you mentioned, Tropical Storm Debby made landfall about 2 o'clock in the morning, some 75 miles south of where I am standing in Bowles Bay, moving very slowly inland. And what's happening inland here in South Carolina is very much the primary concern of officials. They're really concerned about additional flooding as a result of the storm. It's worth keeping in mind that that concern will linger for days after Debby is long gone. According to the National Weather Service, the rivers and creeks are not expected to crest in this state until about mid-next week. So flooding will remain the primary concern, even though along the coastline right now, as you can tell, Joe, we are experiencing some pretty strong wind.
You know, Aaron, Debby has essentially been hovering over South Carolina for almost 2 days, breaking several rainfall records in the state. This is happening during the peak vacation season. I know you're speaking with tourists there. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, you know, normally this time of year, Myrtle Beach will be absolutely bustling with tourists. This is a tourism town, big industry here in South Carolina, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it has been hit hard by this storm. I was out in the town just yesterday. What normally is full of tourists, people enjoying their vacation, was a veritable ghost town. Restaurants closed, shops closed. Speaking to tourists that were here when Debby actually moved in and struck, they were disappointed, but taking it in stride. Take a listen.
Never. We've been coming down for 15 years. We usually come in either July or August. We have never experienced anything like this. We've always had great sunshine and green lights and peace.
Now, here in Myrtle Beach, there has been some localized flooding, but other than that, the hope of business owners in this area is that once all of this passes, they'll be able to open up their doors and make up for some lost ground.
All
Joe.
right. Aaron, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's check in with meteorologist Angie Lastman for the latest on Debby's path. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. South Carolina, North Carolina, those are some of the spots that we're going to continue seeing all of these impacts here as the day goes on as far as heavy rain. And the system still coming in with 45 mile-per-hour winds. You can see still tropical storm strength. That big batch of rain mostly spread across North Carolina. South Carolina seeing some of that, and it's working its way into parts of Virginia as the day goes on as well. These are just some of the spots that we're going to continue to see the chance for some strong storms, potentially tornadoes, as well as the flooding. We've got the alerts to prove it. Tornado watch in effect through 1 o'clock. This was extended into the early afternoon hours for parts of Virginia as well as North Carolina. And notice those bright green flood alerts. They are including 22 million people from New York down to South Carolina, with more of that heavy rain on the way for folks in those regions. Here's what we've got as far as the areas we're watching for some of the stronger storms to develop later today. We've already had multiple reports of tornadoes across parts of North Carolina, some damage this morning, but still tornadoes likely from Charlottesville stretching down to the coast. This is going to be the area really to watch for some of the stronger storms to develop as that circulation continues to work its way to the north and west as the day goes on. As it does that, also bringing some additional rainfall. Now, finally, we're going to start to see this system be on the move. So South Carolina will start to see things winding down. North Carolina, not so much. Even as we get through 10 p.m., places like Charlotte, Raleigh, you're still going to pick up some additional rainfall. I'd say 4 inches, maybe 5 inches, around there in that range. Looking up into Virginia, we've got Roanoke about this early afternoon into the overnight hours is when you'll see the heaviest of the rain working through, but still single-digit rainfall amounts expected for folks there. As we work through tomorrow, the system does weaken, doesn't really change a whole lot when it comes to the forecast of how much rain you're going to get. Still looking anywhere from 1 to 3 inches across this region. We'll finally start to see things winding down as far as rain is concerned for northern New England by the time we get into tomorrow night. So you can see Burlington 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. That is when the heaviest rain is centered over you, but we'll slowly but surely start to see things improving as we get into Saturday. In the meantime, still flash flood risk, of course, especially on those really saturated grounds that we've already seen. We know it's been days and days of Debby across this region, Joe, so flash flooding still a big possibility for folks across the mid-Atlantic and the southeast.
All right, we know you'll keep an eye on it. Angie, thank you so much. Vice President Harris and her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are meeting with union members today in Michigan. It's part of their tour of battleground states this week. This comes as the Trump campaign ramps up attacks on this new Democratic ticket. NBC News senior White House correspondent, News Now anchor Hallie Jackson has the latest.
Hey there. The vice president starts her day in Michigan with a union event before heading out west for a stop in the key swing state of Arizona after rallies with her new running mate as former President Trump's running mate hit the road with his own message, both looking to fire up voters less than 90 days out from this election. A battleground blitz for the new Democratic ticket. Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz greeted by a large crowd in Detroit in the swing state of Michigan.
We are joyful warriors.
At one point, Harris pausing to respond to a handful of pro-Palestinian protesters.
Everyone's voice matters, but I am speaking now. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
The focus now, Rust Belt battlegrounds like Wisconsin, where earlier supporters broke into chants of "Thank you, Joe." The cheers for President Biden coming as he sits down for his first interview since dropping out of the race. Asked by CBS News if he's confident there will be a peaceful transfer of power in January.
I mean, if Trump loses, I'm not confident at all. He means what he says. We don't take him seriously. He means it.
On the Republican side, J.D. Vance looking to counter his competitors with campaign stops in the same states, even on the same tarmac at one point, walking toward Air Force 2.
I just wanted to check out my future plane.
Vance attacking Walz, who served 24 years in the National Guard before retiring in 2005, with Vance accusing him of abandoning his Guard unit before they were deployed to Iraq.
It's shameful to prepare your unit to go to Iraq and then to drop out right before you actually have to go.
Walz filed paperwork for his congressional run in February 2005, about a month before reports of a deployment. Harris-Walz campaign officials not clarifying the timing, but framing his decision to pursue politics as a new way to help service members and veterans. The campaign calling him a tireless advocate for our men and women in uniform. Former President Trump now hinting he'll face off with Harris soon.
We'll be debating her, I guess, in the pretty near future.
While insisting he's thrilled she selected Walz as her running mate.
He's a very liberal man, and he's a shocking pick.
And as for Walz, the Harris camp suggests he's generated a lot of enthusiasm and fundraising, with the campaign saying they pulled in $36 million in the 24 hours after Walz was announced as the VP pick. Back to you.
All right, Allie, thank you. Turning overseas now, 3 Taylor Swift concerts were canceled in the Austrian capital of Vienna over safety concern. That's after authorities said they foiled an alleged ISIS-linked terror plot targeting the show. Suspects have been detained, while organizers say that all tickets will be refunded. NBC News international correspondent Kelly Kobiea has the latest from London's Wembley Stadium, which is the next stop on the singer's tour.
Austria's interior minister said this was and is a serious situation. Authorities in Austria say the main suspect has fully confessed. They say he allegedly planned to attack concertgoers with knives, a machete, and explosives. And they say a second suspect had worked for several days with a facilities business that had planned to provide services at the concert in Vienna. Instead, all 3 concerts have been canceled, with authorities saying they've prevented a tragedy. This morning, new revelations in the investigation after an alleged terror plot against Taylor Swift's massive tour was foiled. The music superstar forced to cancel 3 shows in Vienna, Austria, as she wraps up her European leg of the record-breaking Eras tour. Authorities arresting 2 male suspects who were planning attacks on major events in Vienna, including Swift's concerts. One of them, a 19-year-old Austrian, authorities say pledged his allegiance to ISIS. The other is 17 years old. The duo was radicalized online and had specific plans to carry out an attack, adding at least one had chemical substances, but not all of the components needed to make a bomb.
So even if it was a smaller attack, I think her name was what they were after.
According to Swift's website, fans will be provided a full refund for their tickets. But for those who traveled from around the world, they're on the hook for travel and other expenses.
The women in my family have been planning this trip for over a year.
But some fans also praising the response.
I think they handled it really professionally, and also they acted fast. And obviously, we all want to be safe.
There have been fears around major concert events for years. In 2017, 22 people died after terrorists attacked an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England. In the following years, Swift called such attacks her biggest fear, telling Elle magazine she was terrified to go on tour. Swift saying her team put a tremendous amount of planning, expense, and effort into keeping fans safe. While authorities believe they have minimized the threat in Austria, event organizers said they had no choice but to cancel Swift's shows for everyone's safety.
We were all just really sad. I guess it's good and that we're safe, but also really scary.
Authorities in Austria say they are also interviewing, questioning a 15-year-old. They say he has not been arrested and they are not looking for any more specific suspects. Meantime, Swift's European tour does continue here in the UK next week with 5 shows at Wembley. Officials here say they are continuing to view all possible intelligence, but there is no specific threat here.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much. Let's talk more about this with NBC News national security analyst Clint Watts. Clint, good to have you with us. So even after these arrests were made, was it a good idea to still cancel these shows in Vienna, do you think?
I think so. When you look at this, going back to last fall, there's been dozens of suspects arrested around Europe on these ISIS plots, but they didn't necessarily have the capability to do something. There's several things that we've seen here. One, the explosives and trying to build some sort of a weapon. Two, the access to the actual target location is quite complex. So this is very different. And if you look at just the amount of time there, I'm sure law enforcement in Austria wants to run down every single lead and make sure there isn't anybody they missed that might just spring towards any attack that might still be in the plotting and planning stages.
What did you think when you heard that they were radicalized online, according to authorities? How common is that these days? And what does that say about their potential capabilities?
Yeah, so we always look, is it directed or sort of networked with former foreign fighters or inspired? And almost all of the ISIS cases that we've seen in recent times have been inspired. Folks that have been radicalized online. I think the other trend that is quite shocking is the age has gotten even younger. 10 years ago, it was usually someone in their early 20s that maybe had gone to Iraq or Afghanistan and come home. Now we're looking at teenagers, 13 to 19 years old, radicalizing online and trying to carry out plots close to home. It's very different from what we saw a decade ago.
What should we even do to address that issue? Is enough being done to try and tackle this issue of people so young being radicalized online?
It is. I mean, I think social media and the internet is the conduit by which they get there, and how they get there is a little difficult to understand. If you look across Europe, nearly every country's had some suspects that have been arrested in one of these sort of inspired plots or some sort of thoughts about doing a plot. So looking at this, it's going to be online detection and then in-person, mitigation. They're going to have to go out, start doing some contact with youth, try and make sure they understand what is mobilizing them to go towards ISIS.
Do you suspect what happened in Vienna is going to impact security at Taylor Swift's concerts in London or even at the Paris Olympics, especially with the closing ceremonies coming this weekend?
Both of those are events that are well guarded and well defended. They've been planning for it for a long time. The difference is the threat assessment piece. There is no credible threat, or at least they don't have one in Wembley. For the Olympics, I think they've done a really good job of protecting that event. But just across the board, concert venues have been a target for ISIS-inspired attacks, going to Moscow, Paris, Manchester, UK. That is just always going to be something we got to worry about in the future. And it's a ripe target for an inspired attack because it's something that's closer to home where they're at.
All right. Clint Watts, appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you so much. Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including the very latest from Paris. Later in the hour, we're going to go one-on-one with pole vaulting phenom Katie Moon, fresh off her stunning silver medal win yesterday after a grueling 3-hour-long event. Her reaction coming up live. Plus, everything else from the City of Light you may have missed in the last 24 hours, including an incredible come-from-behind victory on the track for Team USA, which you're really going to have to see to believe. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back now with the latest from Paris as the U.S. continues to dominate the medal count with just a few days to go now in the Summer Olympics. Team USA closing in on 100 overall medals after another day of incredible performances, including one of the all-time great finishes to the men's 400-meter race. NBC's Jay Gray is live in Paris with the latest. Jay, give us some of the highlights from Team USA as they added even more golds to their tally in Paris.
Yeah, how great is this going, Joe? You're right, 27 golds now for Team USA here in Paris. That is amazing, and there are many chances, 27 chances for medals just today. Let's talk about last night in Quincy Hall. You have to start there. The 400 sprinter coming in out of the last turn and into the home stretch. He wasn't really considered a medal contender. He didn't care what people said. He surges past everyone, diving at the tape, finishing another photo finish on the oval inside Olympic Stadium. He runs a 43.40, takes home the gold. What a big win for Team USA. Women's team pursuit. The cycling here has been unbelievable. Another gold for women's cycling and team pursuit. They got out ahead early and never looked back. They rushed to gold in the velodrome. Sarah Hildebrandt. She's a wrestler, and now she's a world Olympic champion. Gold medal for Sarah Hildebrandt. Here's what happened. She had to wrestle one of the competitors, and that competitor didn't make weight, so they had to flip everything around. So she was wrestling somebody she really wasn't prepared for. It didn't matter. She won 3-0, and she gets the gold as well. Team USA just on a roll. Let's keep this going, Joe, through the end of the games.
Exactly. I love it. All right, so here's an interesting one. Medal winners for Team USA of the Summer Games. We're used to that by now. We also have some gold medals dished out to winter athletes. We're talking about the U.S. figure skating team from the Winter Olympics in Beijing and Paris. They received their gold medals from 2.5 years ago. What's going on here?
Yeah, how cool is that, though? They did it here, and they did it inside the Celebration Square, which is just right behind us here in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower, so that they could really get the proper presentation. Of course, this is the gold medal figure skating team from Beijing in 2022. Russia was initially awarded the gold medal, and of course, the Russian athletes were later ruled ineligible because of doping issues there, and so they're still not competing. Some Russian athletes here, but they're competing as individuals. So yeah, the figure skating team comes in. There's a big crowd. They're awarded their medals, and they did some dancing and some of the skating poses out there. It was really cool to see. Instead of just, hey, a box came in the mail today, guys, you got your gold medal. They made a production out of it, and I think that was pretty good.
Nathan, Jen, and company, congratulations to them. Better late than never. All right, Jay, we got 27 medal events today. What are you looking for?
Yeah. Look, I think you've got to look to the 400 hurdles. We've got the Sydney McLaughlin in the 400-meter hurdles. She even clipped one of the hurdles in the preliminaries in the qualifying and still coasted to a win there, so she's got to be a strong contender. Noah Lyles, this guy who, he ran the fastest time in the 100, but it took longer to figure out if he was the actual winner than it did for the men to run the race. They had photo finish. They had to keep looking at it. He won that. He said he was going to come here and win 2 golds. Unfortunately, he struggled a little bit in the prelims and the qualifying. Even in his semi-heat last night, he finished second. He says it's no problem. In fact, he said, when I come around that turn, the rest of the runners are going to be depressed. They're going to be sad. They don't have a chance. So I think he's confident. Let's see if that can transfer to the track.
All right, and if he wins, we'll see if it's by more than 5 thousandths of a second. All right, Jay Gray, good to see you.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Always.
This morning, Russia says it's battling an unprecedented cross-border incursion from Ukrainian troops. NBC News reporter Matt Bodner has that and other international headlines. Matt, good morning.
Joe, good morning. We'll kick things off this hour in Russia, where local forces are battling against Ukrainian troops who have made their way into Russian territory near the city of Kursk. This is Ukraine's largest cross-border operation since the war began, and it's the first known example of uniformed Ukrainian military troops entering Russia. There have been prior raids. Those were conducted by paramilitary groups, many of them pro-Ukrainian Russians. The situation on the ground remains unclear. Ukraine is not saying very much about it at all. But President Putin yesterday convened his Security Council to begin working to answer this incursion. Putin's called it a, quote, large-scale provocation, and Russian state media has begun to allege that Ukraine is killing local civilians. Meanwhile, Russian pro-war bloggers on Telegram, often a good source of info on the war, have suggested Ukrainian forces have taken control of up to 3 small towns in Kursk region. The claims, however, at this time are unverified. Moving along now to Yemen, where local officials say that 30 have been killed and hundreds displaced by serious flooding. The flooding took place in the city of Hodeidah following days of rain, forcing people to flee from 500 homes. 5 are still missing, and also other regions have been affected. Officials have not released a nationwide casualty total from the flooding, unfortunately, this time. And we'll wrap up this hour at the Great Barrier Reef, located off the east coast of Australia. Researchers have charted average sea temperatures around the reef have hit their highest in 400 years over the past decade, warning that if climate change is not reversed, the reef is unlikely to survive. The Great Barrier Reef is, of course, the largest in the world, and it's one of the ocean's most critical ecosystems. High temperatures spark coral bleaching events, and this is when coral expels algae that it uses for food, but it also can sometimes kill the coral. For the past 5 years, the Great Barrier Reef has experienced regular and serious bleaching, and researchers are observing that it's happened earlier this year across 2/3 of the reef. And they're saying that at this rate, the reef simply cannot adapt fast enough to survive. Back to you, Joe.
All right, Matt, thank you so much. Coming up, a new lawsuit is thrusting that doomed Titan submersible back into the global spotlight this morning. After the break, why the family of one of the explorers killed on board now says the whole tragedy could have been prevented before the vessel entered the water. We're going to dig into the details next. We're back with more on a new lawsuit coming out of last year's Titan submersible implosion. The family of a French explorer and Titanic expert who died in the disaster is seeking more than $50 million in a wrongful death lawsuit. He was among 5 people who died when it imploded during a trip to the wreckage site of the Titanic in June of 2023. The experimental submersible is owned by OceanGate, which has since suspended operations. The lawsuit accuses the sub's operator of gross negligence, saying OceanGate failed to disclose key facts about the vessel and its durability. Here to talk more about this is NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. So this, I guess, seemed inevitable that we'd see a lawsuit in this. What exactly is it they're arguing and seeking here with this one?
Some of the claims are pretty standard, like, for example, the submersible was unsafe. It's a products liability type case. Some are a little unusual, and I actually have some experience. I have cases involving what's called the Jones Act. This is a maritime law, very old, a little antiquated, a little strange, but it serves to protect usually people who are injured at sea. And one of the claims is a seaworthiness claim. And that can be a very powerful plaintiff's tool because as long as the vessel was unseaworthy, it had some problem, you can get what's called strict liability. In other words, automatic liability regardless of whether someone was negligent or did something that fell below a standard of care. So some very powerful claims here that really are tools in the plaintiff's arsenal to go after this defendant company and the insurance company.
What is it exactly the attorneys here for the plaintiff have to prove? How strong of a case does this seem to be?
They have a couple different theories. On the seaworthiness claim, generally, if you show that a vessel was unseaworthy, wasn't fit to ride the high seas, and that lack of fitness caused some harm, then you can recover. Usually it's a very powerful claim. Then you have some pretty standard claims, the kind you might even see in a regular my product hurt me or even an auto accident, just that this was negligence and that the negligence caused harm. So these kinds of cases can be really big money cases. However, there may have been a waiver involved, so the plaintiffs have to get past that waiver if they signed it and if it apparently absolves the defendant of responsibility.
Reminder, all those waivers we sign before we do things.
All the time.
As I mentioned, OceanGate has since suspended operations. So how does a case like this move forward if the company's not doing business right now?
2 words, insurance companies. That is the vast majority of the real targets that attorneys like me are going after when we sue companies and individuals. In almost every instance, unless it's a company with massive assets, think, Apple, Google, UPS, for example. I'm just naming companies, not that they did anything wrong. Yep. I'm just saying these are companies with huge assets. You're normally either going after an insurance company or in the case of an individual, say in a car accident, you're going after that person's insurance company. So it doesn't matter that the company is gone, the person's deceased. That's why we buy insurance. You go after the policy. They assign an adjuster. They do all the fighting. They hire the lawyers. This is business as usual. For the most part, if someone's uninsured, most of the time plaintiffs' attorneys aren't even going to go after them.
All right. Danny Cevallos, thank you so much. Today marks 1 year since a deadly fire on Maui ripped through Lahaina. It was the most devastating U.S. wildfire in more than a century, leveling thousands of structures and killing more than 100 people. The historic town of Lahaina, once the capital of the Hawaiian Kingdom, was reduced to rubble within just a few hours, leaving 12,000 people displaced. Now, 1 year later, the people of Lahaina are still working to recover everything that they've lost. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joins us now from Maui with more on the island's path to recovery. Steve, good morning. I know how much Maui means to you, Hawaii means to you. You've been covering this over the past year. How have things progressed since these deadly fires? How's the community doing?
Well, Joe, good morning to you. And I think one thing that the governor recently said, I sat down and spoke with him, is that phase 1 was about survival. Phase 2 is about rebuilding. And if you look at that, if you break it down annually, it really does bear out. I think the community is finally in a place where it is starting to heal. And that only happens when the community feels safe. And that only happens when they're in some form of permanent housing. That housing is starting to finally become available, but it's still, for many families, far in the distant future. And even before you look at people that were directly impacted, people that unfortunately lost a loved one or multiple loved ones or a home, you can even look at the trauma that is so deep that it has permeated every sense of community here on the island of Maui. Look at what it's done to tourism. Tourism is down about year over year, about 20%. At its height, Maui was estimated to be losing about $9 million every single day. But then when you think about what these residents have had to go through, I've spoken to a resident that has said that he's seen directly alcoholism up. The divorce rate is up, of course, homelessness, and people taking their own lives. That is just an impact on survivors, but to the people the thousands of families that are tied to that place, the cultural seat of Hawaii. It has been a very deep impact, but we are finally, again, starting to see some of these programs come online that are giving people the housing they need to move forward. Joe.
Just a reminder of just after the news cameras leave, just the people are still living with so many things for months and years afterwards. Yeah. Steve, there was a recent study from Maui Wildlife that revealed just how great of an impact these fires had on the community. What have we learned, and just what are you hearing from people there about the recovery efforts?
Yeah, that study surveyed thousands of residents, and some of the numbers are just so staggering. 70% of people not in Lahaina, people in Lahaina, of course, report that it has impacted their daily lives in some form. 60% saying that they've had to move at least 3 times or more since the fire in a search for some form of viable housing. 20% that they are crammed in somewhere with family. 10% saying that they're leaving or planning to leave the island altogether. All of this sort of building that cultural trauma that I think is shared between everyone. But I did speak to some residents that are more hopeful. I spoke to a woman named Shayna. She was standing on her house being rebuilt. She couldn't keep the tears from welling up in her eyes because of how much it meant to her just to see some of the studs starting to form in the ground. And I asked her, like I asked so many people after some of these fires have taken place, why would you choose to stay and rebuild? Here's what she told me. I've spoken to so many people who lost something in a fire and just want to leave.
Right.
Why are you choosing to stay?
Gosh, I'm not sure. Yeah. I just had this incredible motivation to rebuild. I have thought about moving, but the urge to rebuild and come back overpowers that. I loved my home here. I loved this neighborhood. I'm from Lahaina, born and raised, so I couldn't imagine not sticking it out.
And Shayna says that that is not a feeling that she just has, but she shares with her neighbors, of course, and she can't wait to get back into her home in Lahaina. Joe.
All right. Steve, thank you so much. Let's talk more about this. We're joined now by Maui Food Bank Interim CEO Al Brislane. Good to have you with us, Al. I know following the wildfires, Maui Food Bank really jumped into action to help those in need on the island. Give us an update on your efforts over the past year.
Well, it's really been a collaborative effort. I mean, we've worked with Red Cross, with Feeding America, the county. So many people have stepped up, and especially, our donors here. But we've almost tripled our distribution. I mean, we were serving about 15,000 people a month through our distribution channels, and it's up to 50,000. We've opened up a warehouse in Lahaina. And a distribution center, and we're seeing hundreds of families go in there to help with food. The answer is housing, but in the meantime, when we can give people food, that gives them some hope and make sure they can go on.
That food distribution center you opened up, I understand you teamed up with the Red Cross. How is that working out? How great is the need for that?
Oh, it's made a big difference. Now we're on the ground right there where we can help those families that have been able to stay in Lahaina. And we couldn't have done it without Red Cross and their support. It's been a great collaborative effort. We opened up the market, and within a matter of days, we were seeing, lines out the door of people needing food.
What are the things you still need, your food bank still needs a year later?
Well, we tell people food, friends, and funds. I mean, we need food. Maui is, Hawaii is different in that almost all the food comes from the mainland. And so, there's a lot of additional costs involved there with shipping. Luckily, the shipping lines have helped us some. But that's what we need. We need to have the money to buy the food. We've had generous donors. Right now, we have some money to do that. But, it's going to be a long battle. This is not going to be over overnight. It's got to get that housing back.
Years of recovery. I understand August 24th will be Food Drive Day in Maui. Talk to us about what that is and how folks can help out.
Well, if people can bring food to the various drop-off sites, they can go to our mauifoodbank.org and, provide food. Or if you're on the mainland and want to provide funds, we'd love that too. But it's a chance for us to get food from the community and bring the community together again. The community has been unbelievable. So has our staff. They've worked so hard to make this happen. We've almost tripled our distribution. And it's because of the community, because of this collaboration, we've been able to do that.
Despite everything, how do you describe the spirit in Maui?
You know, it's such a great culture here. And I'm not from Hawaii, so I'm just so glad to be working with people that care about each other like they do. And I think they've really stepped up. This community has stepped up. They're working together, but there's so much to do. And there's so many people working hard to make it happen.
Thank goodness for everything you and your organization are doing. Al Brislane, thanks for joining us this morning. We wish you the best.
Thank you, Joe.
We're back with a big update from NASA. Those two astronauts who launched on a Boeing Starliner spaceship for what was supposed to be a 10-day mission back in June, well, they may not be coming home until February 2025. That's a lot more than 10 days. NBC senior correspondent Tom Costello has the details on what NASA is trying to do to bring them home.
Yeah, you know, this is starting to feel like Gilligan's Island 3-hour tour, only this is a lot longer. NASA points out Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore could come back in their Starliner spaceship if they had to evacuate the space station in an emergency. But otherwise, their 10-day mission could last 8 months, coming home on a SpaceX ship, Boeing's arch rival.
We are having a great time here on ISS.
Floating some 250 miles above the Earth, astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams thought their trip to the space station and back would last about 10 days. That was 2 months ago. Now, NASA mission managers say they could stay there for another 6 months, leaving their Starliner spaceship and returning home in an Elon Musk SpaceX Dragon capsule on a future Crew 9 mission.
And then we could return 4 crew members in the February 2025 timeframe. And Butch and Sonny would remain on station and return home with them on Crew 9.
And liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V.
Boeing's troubled Starliner launched on a test flight in early June, but it's remained docked at the space station. NASA and Boeing engineers remain divided over whether it's safe to bring Wilmore and Williams back on Starliner. They're concerned helium leaks and engine thruster problems could pose serious risks. Starliner needs those thrusters to safely return home.
Let's go forward into Starliner.
Last month, Williams and Wilmore insisted their ship is safe. Are you confident in the performance of the ship for future missions as well?
Well, that's a fair question. I can tell you that, that mantra you've heard, failure is not an option. That's why we are staying here now.
NASA is now weighing whether to bring Starliner home autonomously without a crew. It's now delayed the SpaceX Crew 9 liftoff to late September, returning next year, and may launch with only 2 astronauts rather than 4. Wilmore and Williams would remain on station well past Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, then return with Crew 9 in February. In a statement, Boeing says we still believe in Starliner's capability and its flight rationale. If NASA decides to change the mission, we will take the actions necessary to configure Starliner for an uncrewed return. Propulsion experts from across NASA have converged on Houston to work the thruster problem. Top NASA managers will convene next week to decide whether to bring the astronauts home on Starliner or SpaceX. The final decision will likely be up to NASA Chief Bill Nelson, himself a former astronaut who flew on the last mission before the Challenger disaster, which he says still haunts him. Joe, back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you. For more perspective on this, let's bring in Clayton Anderson, a retired astronaut who flew on 2 missions to the International Space Station. Good to have you with us. We appreciate having your perspective. So this was supposed to be a 10-day trip. Now it's going to be like 8 months. First question, do they have enough stuff? Do they have enough food and things like that?
Yes, they have enough stuff. The one thing you have to remember is the resupply process for the International Space Station hasn't changed. So recently, Northrop Grumman sent a spaceship to dock or to be grappled with the space station that had supplies in it. So they're not worried about food, water, clothing. That's not an issue.
That's good to hear. Now, I know in your career you helped provide ground technical support during space missions. As we just heard, the astronauts feel the vehicle is safe. Other engineers aren't as confident. I know I'd rather play it safe, but what type of negotiation takes place when you have a situation like this?
Well, NASA and Boeing will have the right people involved. They will have all the smart folks that can get together and solve any of the issues and concerns that they may have. Butch and Sunny, they're happy as clams up there. Yeah, it would delay their stay in space, but for the most part, astronauts love to be in space, so I don't see that as an issue either. The one thing we want to have happen is that there's transparency among everyone involved, that everyone is telling each other exactly what they know and exactly what the situations are so that the smart folks can make the right decision.
Let's talk more about being up there. You've spent a total of about 5.5 months, I believe, aboard the International Space Station. In an interview, you compared it to being Superman. What's it like being up there for so long? What type of headspace does it put you in?
Well, as long as you're not focused on the end, you're focused on the time that you're there, right? So I tried not to think about going home. If I thought about going home, that could become an issue for me in my headspace, that I was so focused on that I would turn away and misstep on other things that needed to occur in space. So as long as you're taking it one day at a time and you keep an optimistic outlook that things are going to be okay, and even if I have to stay up here a little longer, that's a pretty cool thing. I know that they're confident in their families, that will not be an issue for them either. So it's not, I don't think it's as big a deal as folks want to make it.
Is there a part of you that's a little jealous they get to spend so much time up there?
Absolutely, there's a part of me that's jealous. I would love to go back, but I would say honestly that if I were to go back, 1 or 2 months would be enough for me. I wouldn't want to spend 8 or 12 months. You know, I've done all that. The tasks that they're doing, they don't change very much, right? So a couple months would give me a chance to experience zero-G, experience the food and the camaraderie, and then I'd probably be ready to come home.
You don't need the full Gilligan's Island experience. All right. Clayton Anderson.
That's true. That's true.
Good to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Joe.
Coming up, we're going to take you back to Paris with even more domination from Team USA. After the break, we're going to go one-on-one with the pole vaulting phenom Katie Moon, fresh off her breathtaking silver medal performance on Tuesday. There she is. Katie joins us next with her reaction to Olympic glory. Stick with us. This is Morning News Now. Back now with a look at the athletes for Team USA finding success in a spot on the podium in Paris. Contributing to the 8 new medals for the U.S. on Wednesday, pole vaulter Katie Moon, who completed her best jump of the season to win silver. We're lucky to be joined now by Team USA's pole vaulter and newest silver medalist, Katie Moon. Katie, congratulations on your win, your second medal. You got gold in Tokyo. How are you feeling?
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy. I would have loved to defend my title, but truly every Olympic year is a whole new experience. This year I had a bunch of injuries, so to just come in here and have my body hold up, I'm just thrilled. I'm so happy.
Let's talk about that, because you discussed how these interruptions to your training, you've had the Achilles injury. So how does it feel to just overcome all of that? Describe this journey. Not even to win silver, just to compete in Paris was an accomplishment, right?
Yes. Yeah. What we do, the Olympics is the pinnacle. So that's all we're training for. Even when we have world championships, this is all we want to compete in. And I'm just so relieved that my Achilles healed up enough to compete well at trials and make the team. And once I got here, my goal was first to make the final and then hopefully medal. And then if I could medal, maybe give gold a shot. And I definitely gave it my best shot, but I had a great day and I have no regrets. I'm so happy. And my family got to be here this time, which just made it incredibly special.
That makes it even better, because we forget that 3 years ago, no one was there to cheer you guys on. So, all right, so you're 33 years old. So I don't like to attach the word old to someone who's 33 years old, but you are now the oldest medalist ever in women's pole vaulting.
I'll take it.
How does it feel to say that? I mean, did it feel like age was going to be a barrier?
I think I've been really fortunate throughout my career to not have chronic injuries, but I think with age does come more injuries and wear and tear on the body. And so I think that's what I was experiencing this year. And I know that I'm definitely towards the back end of my career. This is more than likely my last Olympics. I'm not saying no, but we're going to have to take it year by year and see how it goes. And so I just wanted this one to be as good as it possibly could be. And I'm, like I said, I think with age comes experience and maturity in the event. And I really feel like that benefited me, especially with how many women were in the final. It was a very daunting competition. And so, yeah, I'd say wise rather than old.
I like that. Wise. I'm going to go with that. I mean, let's look at your career. You've won 2 U.S. national championships, an NCAA championship. Now you got 2 Olympic medals. When you head back to Ohio, what kind of party are you going to have?
Oh, a big one, I hope. I'm so proud to be from Ohio, from Cleveland. I love representing them. I grew up cheering for all the sports teams, and so to know that they are behind me in the way that I have been behind the Cleveland sports teams is just surreal, and I'm so grateful. I could not have achieved any of this without their support, so it really is incredible.
I just want to say, yours is the sport that I just truly look at and I think that's impossible. Like, humans can't do that. So
sometimes me too. Depends on the day.
So just doing it, congratulations, but to win a medal, I think it's fair to say you're over the moon today?
I would say so.
You've heard that how many times?
Many times.
Many times.
The best gift my husband gave me was his last name, so it's great.
I love it. Katie Moon, congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but stick with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.